There's nothing conservatives and right-wingers love doing more these days than going online and expressing fake outrage about the so-called fake outrage culture of the left. Time and time again, these right-wing grifters will refer to feminists, Black Lives Matter protesters and LGBTQ activists as professional victims, and even go as far as saying that all of these people are not oppressed, and they do this in order to convince their mostly white, straight, male audience that they are the real victims and they are being oppressed. They will constantly whine about how all the left do is call everyone who disagrees with them a Nazi and racist, which they will then use and claim is proof that they are in fact the real racists and Nazis for doing so. All of this would be hilariously funny if it weren't for the fact that it actually works like a dream. It's both amazing and tragic that in an age where we have the means and the ability to know the truth about so many things, that so many of us are either determined or incapable of accepting it. Now I can already hear the sound of an embittered and triggered right-winger angrily smashing his fat little fingers onto his keyboard as he types a comment underneath this video challenging me to remake this exact same video but about the left. And to those people I would like to say, fuck you! I'm not a fucking jukebox, and I'm not interested in taking your requests. This is my channel, this is my video, and I will upload and talk about whatever the fucking hell I want to, and I am under no obligation to make sure that my content is balanced. Just like you are under no obligation to watch it. It is not my job to make videos that make angry white men like you feel better about themselves and the awful things you believe. There are already more than enough YouTubers on this bloody website who are willing to do that for you, so why don't you piss off and go and watch one of them? For those of you who are willing to have an open mind, please, put up a chair. Anyway, back to the point. So, how do you successfully convince people who are not oppressed that they are? Well, the answer is simple. You lie. You don't even have to lie about an example of them being oppressed, though. You can just lie about a hypothetical example that may happen in the future. In fact, the hypothetical example is a much more effective lie than the just outright example, because if the hypothetical doesn't happen, you can just continue to carry on using it whenever you need to. And if it does ever happen, then you can just turn around and say, hey, I told you so, and use it to increase your credibility. And because the people that these grifters are lying to, i.e. their audience, because these people have no concept of what actual real oppression is, that means that you can get them riled up over the most trivial, inane, silly bullshit. In this video, I would like to address one of those lies that the right wing have been telling for years, and it's about the movie Blazing Saddles. In June of 2020, in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the many Black Lives Matter protests that it inspired and that followed, the streaming service HBO Max announced that it would be temporarily taking down the movie Gone with the Wind from its platform. They also made it clear that they would be re-adding Gone with the Wind in the very near future. But when they do, it would be preceded by a short disclaimer warning any potential viewers about the movie's content and themes. A disclaimer that they could choose to skip if they didn't want to watch it. Now, why did HBO do this? Well, they did it because a guy called John Ridley, who was the Oscar-winning screenwriter for 12 Years a Slave, wrote an op-ed in the Los Angeles Times asking them to do so. At no point in his article did he say he wanted the movie banned or censored. In fact, he made the point of saying the exact opposite. He also asked HBO to just add a disclaimer about the film's content. And guess what? That's what they did. So, effectively, there's been no real appreciable difference to what the state of affairs was before. But despite the fact that HBO, who have every right to temporarily remove or to put on any movie they want, and particularly this 80-year-old piece of shit, from its service, and even though HBO quite quickly, in a matter of just over a month or so, put it back up with a simple content disclaimer, which again, viewers had the option to skip if they wanted to. When the right found out about that, they did what they do best all the time, and they overreacted and had a fucking temper tantrum like this was the modern day equivalent of a Nazi book burning, or Julius Caesar had just burned down the fucking Library of Alexandria in 48 fucking BC. But when they lost their shit, they had to stop and think, because there was a problem. Because whatever your opinion is on Gone with the Wind, whether you like it or not, classic, blah, blah, whatever, the fact of the matter is this. It is a very, very difficult film to defend in terms of just its content. Now, there is no denying, and I am not going to deny, its place in history as a classic Hollywood movie. But it is also a rancid, regressive work that celebrates slavery, glorifies treason, and for good measure, romanticises rape. And those aren't even new or recent criticisms either. Before anyone says, just times have changed, things were different. Actually, they weren't. Here are several news articles, some of which were written as far back as 1939, condemning Gone with the Wind before it had even come out. And in fact, the content of Gone with the Wind could have been a lot worse were it not for the interference of the NAACP, who, upon hearing about the film being made and knowing about the original book that it came from, they demanded, first of all, that every use of the N-word be removed from the script, because the original book contains quite a lot of N-words. It makes Huckleberry Finn look relatively restrained. And they also asked that they cut and take out or change any of the scenes in the movie that would be based on the book which feature the KKK burning down people's houses, which, by the way, was they were portrayed as the good guys in that book. So the director agreed to cut out all references to the N-word, and he cut out the scene where the Ku Klux Klan burned down a lot of people's villages and houses, and we're all supposed to cheer and go, yeah, get in there. But these changes that were made to the film were not enough to make the film's story any less offensive to African Americans, which is why so many of them, and here are pictures if you don't believe me, picketed and protested outside cinemas that chose to show the movie. The bottom line is this: too much of Gone with the Wind is almost impossible for even the most repugnant and odious of Republican to defend in public. And I know this for a fact because the first person to jump on this issue was Ted Cruz. And even he didn't try to make a case solely for Gone with the Wind. He instead tried to water it down a bit and divert the conversation down a slippery slope by tweeting the following. Here's a radical idea. Don't censor Gone with the Wind. Don't censor Blazing Saddles. Don't censor Quentin Tarantino. Don't censor anything. Now, let me remind you that nothing had been censored. I cannot overstate that enough. Gone with the Wind was, and still is, available to rent, purchase and stream on almost every single platform out there and every single streaming service. And if you can't find it on any of them, guess what? This is the fucking internet. Someone's bound to have uploaded that shit somewhere else. It just wouldn't be available on HBO Max briefly. I also have trouble, by the way, believing that Ted Cruz genuinely advocates for the idea of don't censor anything. I mean, really, Ted? You think that nothing should ever be censored, ever? Really? So does that mean that you think it's okay for, let's say, a TV station to freely and openly broadcast hardcore incest pornography? And, oh wait, okay, that's a bad example. Anyway, it's actually the second line of Ted's tweet that I want to talk about. Don't censor Blazing Saddles. It's interesting that Ted Cruz specifically chose to mention this because, and I cannot overstate or stress this enough, nobody was trying to censor Blazing Saddles either! Not only was nobody trying to censor Blazing Saddles, but nobody had ever tried to censor Blazing Saddles. And in the past year since this tweet was sent, nobody has even tried since then to censor Blazing Saddles. In fact, if you Google the words Blazing Saddles cancelled and you go through the first 8 to 10 pages of fucking links, you will find two types of article. Most of them are opinion pieces written by various conservative hacks talking about how the left are definitely going to cancel Blazing Saddles very soon. And the rest of the articles are written by either neutral or left-wing commentators explaining why literally nobody on the left is planning on or has ever planned to cancel Blazing Saddles, and it's just a right-wing fantasy, so shut up. Now, I know that the results of a Google search are not enough to dismiss or debunk an argument, but you have to admit that it is kind of suspicious and weird when you see so many people on one side of an argument publicly respond and react to something that you literally cannot find one example of anyone on the other side ever saying, except to bring it up to point out that they never said that and they don't want to. Now, Cruz was not alone here. On that same day, Cruz tweeted out this link. It was an article posted on a right-wing website called Hollywood in Toto, which is run by Christian Toto. And the article was entitled, "Are these 7 movies on the woke mob's chopping block?" Number 1 on that list, Blazing Saddles, which Toto claimed, quote, has been in the crosshairs of the left for some time. A claim that he backs up and substantiates with literally fuck all. Nothing. Sweet Fanny fucking Adams, right? But I'm sure that's just because he forgot. I mean, why would he lie about this? On that same day, in response to the Gone with the Wind story, a Fox News reporter called Joseph Wolfson quote-tweeted the Gone with the Wind story with the words, "Watch out, Blazing Saddles, you're next." Really? It's next? Was it? Was it next? Well, this was posted back in June of 2020, so I can only assume that if it was meant to be next, that's either because the left completely forgot about it, or we've just been so busy, we've just been doing other shit, and we haven't got round to Blazing Saddles yet, but we're going to definitely do it. Now, I want to try and keep this video down to a borderline reasonable fucking length. And so I'm not going to go through every single example that I found, whether it's an article in a mainstream newspaper, some rancid, shitty fucking partisan blog, or just some random nutter on a fucking comment forum. Right? It would be impossible for me to fucking put together and go through every example of someone on the right inaccurately predicting the inevitable attack on Blazing Saddles by the woke mob. Do it your fucking self. But that brings us to the next question. Where did this Blazing Saddles myth come from if no one's ever actually suggested it? Who was the first person to make this argument? Well, I don't know for sure, but the earliest example I could find, it was an article entitled 10 Reasons to Believe the Left Will Eventually Ban Blazing Saddles. Now, this was written by a guy called John Nolte and was posted on the website Breitbart.com on the 9th of May 2014. That, in case you can't work that one out, is nearly 7 years ago. And in that time, I can only dread to think how many times people have made this claim or this story has been trotted out. I would wager it's into the bloody tens of thousands. Suffice to say, not one of those 10 reasons that Mr. Nolte listed has come true. So now I have to turn to you, the person on the right who believes this crap. If you are someone who has fallen for this and you came to this video believing that Blazing Saddles was under threat for the left because you've been told it a million times, I have to ask you a question right now. Given what I've just told you and what I've shown you, at what point for you is the penny gonna drop? When are you gonna realise what's actually happening here? How long are you gonna sit there and let these bastards lie to you? For the last 7 years, you have been told time and time again that it's only a matter of time before the left comes after Blazing Saddles and takes it away from you. And not only has that not happened, but nobody has even so much as tried to make it happen. So let me say this unequivocally. The left, the woke mob, the social justice warriors, the PC brigade, the cultural Marxists, the gender communists, the reverse vampires, whatever the fuck, we do not want to ban Blazing Saddles. And more to the point, we never will. Now, you don't have to take my word for it, but I would say, look at the evidence so far. But that then brings us on to another question. Why do so many right-wingers seem convinced or want to convince you otherwise? Well, I have a theory about that, folks. Now, it is just a theory, and it's based on my personal opinion. For what it's worth, here it is. The reason conservatives and right-wingers keep on claiming that the left are going to cancel Blazing Saddles is because they want to make us do it for them. You see, Blazing Saddles was released in 1974. It's 5 years older than me, folks. And it was written by Mel Brooks and Richard Pryor, primarily. The story is about the construction of a new railroad which is forced to build its route through a small town called Rock Ridge. The Attorney General, Hedley Lamarr, realises that this will make Rock Ridge worth millions, and so he comes up with a plan to get the residents to abandon the town. He sends a gang of thugs into the town to assassinate the sheriff. He then convinces the governor to appoint a black railroad worker named Bart as the new sheriff. Lamar's hope is that the townspeople will be so outraged and offended by the appointment of a black man to the position of sheriff that it will create chaos and they will all leave Rock Ridge at his mercy. Bart ends up finding an ally in Jim, aka the Waco Kid, played by Gene Wilder, who work together and try to overcome the town's hostility and save it from Lamar. I won't give away too much in case you haven't seen it, no spoilers here, but suffice to say that's the basic idea, that's the crux of the film. And what you've got to understand, folks, is back then, back in the day, back in 1974, people like Ted Cruz, people like Fox News, and people like Breitbart, and Ben Shapiro, and Steven Crowder, and all these other fucking right-wing knobheads, they would be the ones sat there decrying and denouncing Blazing Saddles as another example of woke cinema coming from liberal Hollywood to try and push this SJW agenda. They wouldn't have used those words, but I've translated it into modern day for you. Blazing Saddles is possibly, in terms of comedy, the OG movie of progressive cinema. It's probably the most famous satire of white supremacy and racism that's ever been created. And so if you're one of these people who pisses and moans about how the left has ruined modern comedy, then I'm afraid you can't sit there and praise Blazing Saddles, because guess what? That was the movie that got the fucking ball rolling. And I know that a lot of you people on the right, a lot of you grifters, you only really like it because the film contains a lot of examples of white people using the N-word over and over again. It's very liberal with the racial slurs, which for many of you seems to be the best part of freedom of speech, which is weird, isn't it? However, what you probably don't realise is that initially Mel Brooks was very uncomfortable with using the N-word throughout the film. And in fact, he at one point said that he didn't really want to use it at all. However, he was convinced otherwise by his co-writer, Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor told him that the use of the word was not only defensible on the basis that people saying it were clearly the bad guys, but it also highlighted their idiocy. The right wing's narrative for the longest time now has been that the left are no longer the left. They're no longer liberal. They're not what they used to be. And that we're actually the authoritarian fascists trying to divide society. And what better way to prove that is there than to create a myth that the left would want to ban one of the most important and progressive anti-racist movies that's ever been made? You also hear people go on and on and on saying the following sentence you've probably heard. Oh God, these days Blazing Saddles, that wouldn't get made today. Well, one of the reasons it wouldn't get made today is because, guess what? Someone made it 45 years ago. It's kind of the thing with films. You don't just make another film that you've already made for the sake of it, do you? What would be the fucking point? Right? You don't need to make it. It's already been done. That's what timing is. It's relevant to the day. But guess what? Back in 1974... there were things that you did back then 40 years previous to that you couldn't get away with and do at that time period. It's true of every decade. Stop acting like this is new. However, that's not actually strictly true when people say Blazing Saddles wouldn't get made today, because it turns out it is going to get made today, because in 2016 it was announced that it was going to be remade and turned into an animated movie. Before you lot start going, oh no, they're going to ruin that as well, let me just point out to you that one of the people who is lending their voice to the Blazing Saddles animation movie is Ricky Gervais, who I think we can all agree is a man who has quite clearly been no fan of cancel culture. So, nobody wants to ban Blazing Saddles. No one's tried to ban Blazing Saddles, and contrary to what you lot keep saying, it actually is getting made again today. But if you need one more thing, one more little bit of evidence, if you need a final nail in the lid of what I call now the Blazing Saddles myth coffin, if you want to hammer that corpse in, consider this. On August the 14th, 2020, when HBO Max announced that they had just added Gone with the Wind back to their streaming service, they also added one other film. Do you know what that film was? It was Blazing fucking Saddles. And when HBO put it back on, the little bit of coverage and mentions in the media or on social media or in blogs that it got, it wasn't outrage coming from the left. Do you know who was outraged with HBO for putting Blazing Saddles on their service? It came from the exact same people who have been telling you for the last 7 years that the left are trying to get it cancelled. But why were they outraged? Well, they were outraged because, as they did with Gone with the Wind, HBO had put a short video content warning that would precede the movie, so it could inform people who may be a lot younger, or people who just don't know about the content and maybe are in company where they don't want to watch that kind of film, about the content. And again, you could skip the fucking thing if you didn't want to watch it. But some of these articles that reported it, believe it or not, still tried to push this narrative. One conservative blogger wrote the following: Blazing Saddles has been saved from banning by adding a disclaimer. The movie has been on the list of those receiving criticism from Black Lives Matter activists. No! Wrong! Not even fucking once. When you are this wrong, this often, and you get fucking found out and exposed for being wrong, and it's staring you in the face, you're not supposed to sit there and carry on. You're supposed to shut up and fuck off for a while. I mean, why are you people angry about content warnings? They've literally existed on TV and film and in music and comedy and theatre since the dawn of time. If you watch a TV show and they say, viewer discretion is advised, that's a fucking content warning. Have you ever seen the certificate on a film? Have you seen that little rating at the bottom that says PG or U or rated R or rated X? Guess what? That's a fucking content warning. And do you know why they put those content warnings there? It's so people don't accidentally watch this film, not realising what the fuck it contains, and end up seeing something that offends and upsets them. And then, having been upset and offended, they have a legitimate grievance of complaint. The reason HBO have put that fucking disclaimer there is because they don't want people to be offended and watch it who might get upset by that. And therefore, they're protecting the film, which should be exactly what the fuck you people want. But folks, they'll never be happy. Do you know why they'll never be happy? Because they don't care. Because this isn't about Blazing Saddles. They just picked that. They've picked loads of other things as well. They've used loads of other examples. They love using this straw man. I saw one guy on a Fox News interview claiming that, well, eventually they're going to ban shows like Cheers and Seinfeld because the entire cast is white. What a ridiculous fucking thing to say. Right, if you're going to ban a film or a TV show because the entire cast is white, that's pretty much every show fucked at that point. And if that's a reason for fucking banning something, then why the fuck would you ban Blazing fucking Saddles? You might think this is a hell of a lot of time that I've spent trying to debunk something that seems quite trivial in the end, but really it's not. Because ultimately, all of this is just part of the big mosaic of bullshit, the big web of lies that they build. And I want you to think about this, truly. If these people are willing to, if they are willing to lie to you, if they are perfectly comfortable over the course of 7, 8 years, and they'll keep going, it's never going to end. If they are willing to lie about something as trivial and as inconsequential as a movie, and whether or not that movie is going to be featured on a streaming service, if they're willing to put this much effort into a lie about something that really doesn't matter, then how much effort do you think they're willing to put into a lie about something that fucking does? And while you're too busy losing your shit over Blazing Saddles, they are fucking you over and over again. And eventually, if you don't stop them, they will carry on. It will get worse. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please give it a like, consider subscribing, and consider supporting me on Patreon. It would be most appreciated. I look forward to the comment section of this video. I'm sure it will be objective and civilised as a motherfucker. My name is Brother Neuro, and remember folks, where there's no sense, there's no feeling.